You live in New York. Were you living in New York when Tribeca flooded a few years ago?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, I mean, I think in a situation like that, most people emerge from a particular disaster and think, my God, since this is so awful, it must be an anomaly. And, I think New York was really horrified as a city by Sandy, but there's going to be Sandy's, I don't remember the exact stat, like once every 5 years by the end of the century.
What category storm was Sandy?
I think it made landfall as a category 3.
So it's not even a 5.
Yeah.
So if a 5 hit, is it possible for a 5 to hit New York, or is it too far north?
No, it's possible.
Totally possible.
I was talking to a really prominent climate scientist a few months ago who is like he was one of the lead authors on the UN report, lives in New York, does a lot of consulting with the city. And I said, so we're going to build a seawall to protect New York from flooding? And he was like, oh, absolutely. Manhattan real estate's way too expensive to let flood. So we'll definitely build a seawall. But an infrastructure project like that takes at least 30 years to build. And if we started right now, we wouldn't be able to finish in time to save Howard Beach and parts of Brooklyn and Queens. If we started right now, he said. He said, the city knows this. And you'll see in the next few years, they'll stop doing repairs on infrastructure. They'll stop attending to the subway lines in those neighborhoods. And even a few years after that, they'll start saying explicitly to the people who live there, you might be able to continue living in these homes for a couple decades, but you're not going to be able to leave them to your kids.
Whoa.
This is in New York City. It's like the richest country and the richest city in the world. And yeah, huge parts of southern Brooklyn and Queens are going to be underwater.
So for the people that live there right now, what parts are you talking about?
Well, the one that he mentioned most explicitly was Howard Beach, but it's kind of it's like a mob neighborhood, and it's
still.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, yeah.
Yeah? So, because that was like the Gotti neighborhood, right?
Yeah, that's where they buried all the dead bodies.
Wow. I didn't know that was still a mob neighborhood.
Well, to the extent that there is a mob. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that's true everywhere on the coast, everywhere. It's not just New York. New York's not exceptional.
Right.
There are projections that like $30 billion of New Jersey real estate could be underwater by 2030. 2030.
Why is that not as alarming?
I
was born in New Jersey too. It's not as alarming.
And then Miami Beach is done for.
Yeah, Miami Beach is almost inevitable, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they could build a seawall, but that's
projects, not going to help because of the ground, right?
It's just so expensive. So you really have to pick your poison. And then when you look around the world, it's like Bangladesh. That country is going to be almost entirely underwater. That's hundreds of millions of people. If we wanted to build a seawall, they can't afford that. Who's going to pay for that? And
this is all because of the raising sea level, because of the melting ice, because of the temperature, and all this is happening.
And I think, we think of sea level as really a thing that happens on the coastline, which it is primarily, but it also increases flooding on rivers because the water is all connected.
Of course.
So flooding in the UK is expected to grow 50-fold by the end of the century.
What?
Well,
50-fold?
London is already like underwater a couple times a year. I mean, not the whole city, but
what is this, Jamie?
This is Bangladesh. I just went to Bangladesh underwater.
Jesus.
And this is like a video that pops up showing.
Oh my God, these people are fucked.
Yeah.
It says 18 million residents live here.
That's a swamp.
Dhaka. Yeah.
That looks crazy. Like if you were a real estate projector and you're flying over that, you're like, oh yeah, we can't build here.
Yeah, Jakarta will be totally underwater.
Look at those apartment buildings. Like you could see the water level. Look, back up a little bit.
This is just a running little thing.
Oh, but if you look at doesn't that look like a water level on the apartment buildings on the right hand side near where your cursor is?
Yeah.
Like that's gonna go up to where that orange level is. Fucking Christ.
Well, I mean, over millennia, they're going to rise hundreds of feet.
Oh God.
I mean, it's going to take a long time, so you can adjust to that a little bit, but
that's always been the case, right? I mean, they find these artifacts and things in the middle of the ocean in areas where people used to be able to live and now they can't live anymore.
Yeah. I think that'll be.
We have to move. People have to move. So what's a good spot? Alberta?
Anywhere north, anywhere off the coast.
Edmonton.
Yeah.
That's the spot now.
I mean, I think I would, like, people ask me that all the time, and I say, honestly, the place that I would move to is somewhere in Scandinavia.
Really?
Because, I talked about the impact of economic growth before, but there are going to be parts of the world that benefit economically from this. Anywhere in the north. So Canada, Russia, and Scandinavia will benefit because...
But why? Don't go to Scandinavia. Go to Canada. It's right there.
Well, but Scandinavia seems
nice
kind of like
people.
prettier to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
I like
Scandinavia is nice, but Canada's like our neighbors.
Although
like
they also,
friends.
they have wildfires there too.
Canada,
and
they do.
In the Arctic Circle in Finland
They also
last
have
year.
bears.
Yeah.
Mountain lions.
But so, these guys, the economists who study this stuff say that there is actually an optimal temperature for human productivity. It's 13 degrees Celsius, which is the historical median temperature of the U.S. It's also the historical median temperature of Germany.
What is 13 Celsius? Was that 60 degrees or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's like in the high 50s.
What we got, Jamie? Google didn't give it to you? Whenever I'm in Canada, I'm always like, I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, they're like, holy shit,
55.
it's 22 degrees.
55?
54.
And so for every degree north of that, you lose about a percentage point of GDP. So the U.S. is now at about 13.5 degrees Celsius at our median temperature. That means that we're losing about a half percentage point of GDP every year from it. But there are parts of the U.S. that were cooler than 13 and are now brought up to this optimal level. Silicon Valley is like exactly at 13 degrees right now, which is, notable because they're like
super productive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that'll be true for Scandinavia generally. And it may be part of the explanation why there's been so much economic productivity in Scandinavia over the last generation is that they have already started doing better with temperature. Crops are going to be more bountiful in Russia. Like Russia will have better agriculture because of global warming, which is why they make such a, they're such a complicated figure in the geopolitical story about climate. So they're a petrostate. They have almost all of their economic activity has to do with burning oil, but they're also poised to benefit from warming. So they're doubly motivated to produce more global warming.
Whoa.
And they have such a fuck the rest of the world perspective that they're not going to stop. Whereas Canada, probably they're like likely to, even though they'd benefit from more warming, they'll probably get on board with any program to avert warming. But that's a dilemma that faces every nation. Like Justin Trudeau talks a lot of shit about Donald Trump and his climate policy, but Justin Trudeau is also approving new pipelines. Angela Merkel does the same, but she's retiring nuclear so quickly in Germany that they're having to use dirty energy. And even though they've had this incredible green energy revolution there, their emissions are going up. And every country in the world it's a collective action problem. Every country in the world is incentivized to behave badly and let the rest of the world clean up the mess. So I was talking to this guy yesterday about wildfires, and he was like, California is doing so great, with all of the emission standards. They're basically, holding themselves to the Paris Accords, even though the country as a whole isn't. But that impact isn't local. It's global. So it's dissipated. The temperature impact on California wildfires will be determined by, like I said earlier, basically what China does. So in terms of, what any individual area, what any individual nation is doing, the motivations are really, really complicated there. And in California in particular, this is a bit of a tangent, but, the state has done incredible stuff with emission standards, fuel efficiency, green energy. And yet all of those gains now are wiped out every year by the fires, because fires are trees are burning. Trees are basically coal in the sense that they are stored carbon. When they burn, they release carbon into the atmosphere. So every time there are wildfires like there were last year in California, it literally wipes out all of the progress that the state made in all of its green initiatives that year. Yeah. And about in Brazil, the president of Brazil wants to basically deforest the Amazon. The Amazon is responsible for something like 30% of the world's oxygen, and is a huge. So all plants obviously absorb carbon and produce oxygen. So plant life is really good for fighting climate change.
When you say he wants to deforest the Amazon, at what scale? What is he talking about doing?
So the scientists who've studied his proposal say that his plans would be the equivalent of adding over a 10-year period, adding a second China to the world's global footprint.